We gonna be all right. We gonna be all right. Welcome to Solo Podcast, episode #68, How to Be More Backable. Today is the first episode that I have a second camera on a solo podcast. It's also the first time I'm filming a solo podcast outside, which I usually film all my guest podcasts outside and my solo podcast inside. But today, we're going all outside, 2 cameras, which is just my iPhone. Gotta utilize your resources. We are talking about how to be more backable. What backable means is how do you get people to back your ideas? Whether it's something as small as I want to get a raise at work, I want my parents to support my dreams, or is something as big as I'm CEO of a company and I need to get millions of dollars of investing. How do I get investors to invest in my company? How do I get my parents to believe in my ideas? How do I get you guys as an audience to get behind, to back this podcast? That's the concept of being backable. And this entire podcast is based off a book called Backable by Sunil Gupta. And it is debatably my favorite book of all time. Other than the Bible, this one's really up there with every self-help book I've ever read. And to this day, I do not know how I got it. I didn't buy it. No one in my family remembers buying it for me. It just showed up on my bookshelf one day, and it's debatably one of my favorite books of all time. So if you like what you hear in this episode, then you should go buy the book. There's 7 steps to being more backable, which are convince yourself first, step number 1. Cast essential characters, step number 2. Find and earn secrets, step number 3. Go beyond Google, or make it feel inevitable, step number 4. Flip outsiders to insiders, step number 5. Play exhibition matches, step number 6. Let go of your ego, step number 7. So, before I start this podcast, I want to tell you my why behind the podcast, which is that I want you to invest in soul wealth. So most people measure success by wealth metrics, which are money, possessions, achievements, and status. And the goal of this podcast is to change the way you measure success to relationships and memories, soul wealth. And a lot of this podcast is going to be using that message as an example. How do I get you guys to rally behind that message? I want to open this podcast with a story. It's the same story that Sunil Gupta opens the book with, and it's about NASA engineer Bob Ewing. So NASA engineer Bob Ewing, one morning, he woke up and he was driving to work, but it wasn't a normal morning. This time, as he drove to work, he's beating his car steering wheel and he's crying profusely because he knows everyone who's about to take off in NASA's rocket launch is going to die. So what had happened was the night before this morning, it had gotten so cold that him as a NASA engineer knew that one of the rocket ship parts was going to freeze, and if that part was frozen, it was going to cause the rocket ship to blow up. So he called an emergency meeting, and he got together all the NASA employees, everyone who was working on this launch, and he told them, we need to delay the launch because if the launch goes, everyone is going to die. But he wasn't able to present his ideas. He wasn't able to convince the people in that room that what he was saying was going to happen. So they decided to go forward with the launch. They didn't think everyone was going to die. And the next morning, he wakes up, he's on his way to work, he's crying, he's beating his steering wheel, and 37 seconds after takeoff, everyone on the rocket ship dies and it explodes. Bob Ewing, to this day, credits himself for the death of those 8 people because he wasn't able to get them to back his ideas. He wasn't backable enough. Now, he's probably being a little harsh on himself. I don't think he is responsible for those deaths. He did the best he could. But the point is that he needed to be more backable. Now let's take a similar but opposite story. Billy McFarland. Billy McFarland wanted to throw the hottest music festival of all time. He promised white sand beaches, 5-star accommodations, the best music artists in the world. He promised such a good experience, he was so backable that he raised $26 million for his event. His event was to be called Fyre Festival. When people landed at this private island for Fyre Festival. They were greeted by some tents and a cheese sandwich. Billy McFarland raised $26 million and he scammed everyone. He is currently serving years in prison for fraud. The point of the book Backable is to give people Billy McFarland's backability, to take his backability and put it in noble-hearted people like Bob Ewing. I love the book so much that I want to help you be backable, whether that's getting your parents to support your ideas, getting you guys to invest in my podcasts, or getting investors to dump millions of dollars into your company. The point is, how do I become more backable? How do I teach you guys to get people behind your ideas? Step number 1, convince yourself first. An issue when someone has a great idea, one of the most common issues with great ideas is that they're shared too quickly. Let's say you want to start a podcast. So you go around and you tell your mom and your dad and all your friends and family about how you want to start a podcast. The issue when you share something too quickly is that they're not as excited about the idea as you are, and they never will be because it's your idea, not theirs. And they will see the flaws with your idea and they'll start to poke holes in your idea, and their unexcitement will become your unexcitement. You can't sell someone on something you're not completely sold on yourself. And if you share an idea immediately, yes, you're sold on it in that moment because you're super excited, but you're not truly sold on it because you haven't thought what that would entail. So maybe you want to start a podcast and you go and tell your mom and your friends and they go, you have no experience public speaking. There's over 2 million podcasts. How are you going to compete? You don't even have a camera. And you haven't prepared for what they're going to say. So their unbelief, their problems become your unbelief and your problems. So what you want to do is schedule incubation time. When you come up with a great idea, before you go around yapping and telling everyone about it, schedule time to convince yourself first. Amazon, one of the biggest companies in the world, Jeff Bezos, when people present a new idea at Amazon, he won't even let them come and present it to him until they've wrote themselves a 5-paragraph essay on why that idea is a good idea. Because he doesn't want someone wasting his time if they're not convinced on the idea they want to tell him. And by forcing his employees to write a 5-paragraph essay on exactly why the idea is a good idea and how it will work, by the time they bring that idea to him, they are way more convicted. They're way more sold on the idea that they are sharing with him. So you want to schedule incubation time first. And second, you want to steer into your objections. What steering into your objections means is that when you come up with an idea, think about who you're pitching it to. If you're pitching it to your mom, if you're pitching it to your boss, if you're pitching it to investors, put yourself in their shoes and think of the 3 biggest problems or flaws they might have with your idea. So let's continue with this podcast example. I want to start a podcast. Before I share this idea with my friends, I know that my friends are going to bring up the fact I have no public speaking experience. So I think of that problem. I think they're probably also going to identify that I don't have a camera. They're probably going to identify I have no speaking experience, I don't have a camera, and that there's so many podcasts in the world. So I write myself an essay and I think about these objections. And one thing when you're pitching your ideas, when you're sharing your ideas, if you can bring up objections that the other person's going to mention before they say them, you look way more credible. So I go and I present my idea to start a podcast and I say, I know I have no public speaking experience, but I've been practicing speech every day in my room for the last month, and I can tell you how I've improved here, here, and here. I know that there's so much competition in the podcast space, but I actually found a promising a promising statistic which says 90% of people quit after the 3rd episode. So if I make it 3 episodes in, then I'm already in the top 10% of all podcasts ever produced. Oh, I know I don't have a camera, but my iPhone shoots 4K footage. So now I go into a pitch and I already mentioned the objections that you're thinking. So first, you want to schedule incubation time. Schedule time to think about your idea before you share it. Second, steer into objections. Third, understand that there's going to be throwaway work. When you have any new idea, you're going to come up with bad ideas to present the idea. So when you come up with any new idea, part of the incubation time is filtering through all the throwaway work. When I first started this podcast, I didn't have the term soul wealth created. I didn't know that I was exactly going to be talking about relationships and memories. But as I went on, as I did it, I threw away work. I threw away bad podcast ideas. I'm inventing new things. So be prepared to have throwaway work. And then 4, when coming up with a new idea, when sharing a new idea, measure your emotional runway. What does this mean? This means it's not enough to be intellectually interested in an idea. You need to be emotionally invested in an idea. So I have a very entrepreneurial mindset. So I'm constantly thinking about business ideas. And a business idea I was recently very excited on was video game urinals. The concept, you go to the bathroom, there's an LED screen, there's holes in your urinal, you can play a variety of different games, you're like peeing in the holes, and then the person next to you has an LED screen, you can like 1v1 or everyone, free for all. I think this is $1 million idea. I'm not kidding you guys, I really think this is a multi-million-dollar idea. I am very intellectually interested in this idea. But if I were to quit this podcast or try to balance this podcast while also creating a video game urinal company, neither of them would be successful. The truth is, while I'm intellectually interested in a video game urinal, I'm not emotionally invested. I'm way more emotionally invested in you guys measuring success by relationships and memories, you guys coming to know God because of this podcast. I'm way more emotionally invested in that than I am in video game urinals. So measuring your emotional runway means that when you come up with an idea, you ask, is this a great idea and is it right for me? So step 1, convince yourself first, recap, schedule incubation time, steer into objections, understand there's going to be throwaway work, and measure your emotional runway. Step 2 is to cast a central character. What casting a central character means is that when you have an idea, let's say soul wealth, measuring success by relationships and memories, when you have an idea, don't pick a niche. I could say that the idea of soul wealth hits the niche of workaholism. Anyone who idolizes work needs to listen and hear the message of soul wealth. I could say the message of soul wealth is particularly interesting to college students. That is a niche. When you're coming up with a pitch, when you're sharing your idea, you want to drop the idea of a niche and you want to pick one person, cast a central character. And then when you share your idea, walk through one person's experience and introduce how your idea, how your concept, how your product will solve an issue in that person's personal experience. So when you're casting a central character, you want to pick one person and you want to create a storyboard. So what creating a storyboard means is that your one character that you've made your product for, that you've made your idea for, you can walk through that person's experience and you can explain how your idea solves a problem within them. So I'm going to take you through an example for a company called Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club was trying to get investment, but no one wanted to invest in their company because no one wanted to invest in Dollar Shave Club because there was already monsters in the industry. There was Gillette, Manscaped, all these shaving companies that have been around for centuries, and the margins on shaving equipment aren't that high. That means that when you're making razors, the price to make them and the price you sell them for, the margins aren't that great. And then you're also competing against industry giants. And what Dollar Shave Club is suggesting is a cheaper version of shaving equipment. So a cheaper version of shaving equipment, trying to get investing for that against giants like Gillette, no one was going to be interested. But the CEO came up with an idea. He casted a central character and he created a storyboard. So when he pitched the idea, he walked his investors through his central character's exact experience. He said, imagine this. You're 16 years old. You go to Target to buy your first shaver. All you want to do is shave your little beard stubble that's growing in. So you go to Target to buy your first shaver. When you finally find the shaving aisle, you realize it's locked behind glass. And the items the shavers are locked next to are the condoms, the lube, the sexual toys. So it's the shavers, the condoms, the lube, the sexual toys, and you're 16. You don't even want to be seen in this aisle. And then you have to click the button that says, call the assistant over, and you click the call the assistant over button, and then the assistant walks over and you're awkwardly standing there like, hey, I don't want the condoms, can I just get the shaver? And then you get the shaver and you don't even have time to pick the right one because you're so uncomfortable in the aisle, and then you walk out. It's expensive. You walk out and you hope that you never have to have the experience again. Well, Dollar Shave Club came in and said, yes, we don't have high margins. We understand Gillette. Sorry, plane. Dollar Shave Club came in and said, yes, we understand there's not high margins. We understand Gillette's been around for hundreds of years. But think about that character who's so awkward, who has to wait in the condom aisle. Dollar Shave Club ships the shaving stuff straight to your door every month, and it's cheaper. So now not only do you not have to go to the store, but you get to avoid the awkward experience. And when he started telling people this storyboard, when he started creating a storyboard about his central character and sharing it in his pitches and sharing it in his ideas, all of a sudden everyone wanted to invest in Dollar Shave Club, and it became one of the biggest companies in the world. So step 2 is to cast a central character, and within that, you want to pick one person. I'll give you another example. When Tim Ferriss wrote one of the most famous novels of all time called The 4-Hour Workweek, read by millions of people, he wrote it to 2 friends who were unsatisfied with their jobs, to 2 friends who didn't want to work the 9-to-5 lifestyle. And Tim Ferriss is pretty much the father of digital nomad, of essentially the 4-Hour Workweek because of that book, but he only wrote it to 2 people. When you open a book and it says, in the first few pages, it says, to my mom, to my girlfriend, to my kids, those books are being written to one person or 2 people, yet they appeal to millions of people. So you want to cast a central character, pick one person, 1 or 2 people, create a storyboard around them, and then don't lose sight of your character. What that means, don't lose sight of your character, is that as your company succeeds, as you begin to get funding and people begin to support your ideas, don't lose sight of that kid walking through the shaving alley. Don't try to bring Dollar Shave Club to the stores. If you bring Dollar Shave Club to the stores, then you're bringing someone back to the experience that you were trying to solve. A lot of people, when they get success, when they get fame, when people begin to back their ideas, they lose sight of their central character. So that is step 2, cast a central character. Step 1, convince yourself first. Step 2, cast a central character. And now on to step 3, find an earned secret. There's 2 aspects of finding an earned secret. 1 is go beyond Google. 2 is intoxicate them with effort. So when you go into a pitch, when you go into an idea, again, this doesn't have to be getting millions of people to invest in your company. This doesn't have to be having your own podcast and getting people to rally behind Soul Wealth. This can be anything as talking to your parents. You want to convince your parents to buy you a car. You want to convince your best friends to support you more, whatever it is. Step 3, find an earned secret. This means that when you go into your pitch, you bring something that can't be found online. You bring something that is notable because of firsthand experience. So you go beyond Google. When you enter your pitch, you bring an earned secret with you, something that can't be found on Google and something that shows you care. An example the author Sunil Gupta mentioned in the book is how he was applying to get a new job at a company. This company hosted a product. I can't remember what the product was, but it's unimportant. And he was about to go into an interview for a company that had a product, and he was researching the product, researching the market audience, and preparing for the interview, which was good. You know, that shows he cares. But he realized, if I go in with just this information, then I'm not going to stand out. And the company's been researching this information longer than I have. I'm just going in for an interview. I'm not adding value or offering anything new. And again, people in an interview are probably not expecting this, but if you can bring an earned secret, it's going to go above and beyond. It's going to make people get behind your ideas, back you more. So what he did was he went to something called usertesting.com. He took the product of the company that he was applying for and he put it on something called usertesting.com. What usertesting.com is, it's a website where you can basically get users to test your product who are unbiased of any demographic. So you can say, I want Asian people 30 to 35 years old to test this product and give me unbiased feedback. So before he went into an interview, he took the product of the company that he was interviewing for and he brought it to usertesting.com, got their desired demographic to try the product, and then he went into the interview and he revealed the information that he learned, and they were so impressed by the information that his interview went way better. So when you're pitching your idea, you want to bring in an earned secret, something that you can't find on Google, something that shows you care, something that you found from firsthand experience. And then second, the second part of an earned experience is intoxicate them with effort. In this example, this guy brought the product to usertesting.com, paid his own money, brought it back to the interview. That shows effort. That indicates that if you invest in my idea, if you hire me, if you give me a raise, then I'm going to use the effort that I took to find this earned secret. I'm going to take it to this position. I'm going to take it to this idea that you're getting behind. So another example is this guy really wanted Howard Stern to write another book. He loved Howard Stern and he believed that he could write a book with Howard Stern and it could be a bestseller. The issue was that Howard Stern had already wrote a book and it was a bestseller, but the process of writing that book was so unenjoyable to Howard Stern that he basically vowed to never write a book again because he didn't want to go through the horrendous process of writing a book, which he already suffered through. So as this guy approached Howard Stern, he said, hey, I want to write a book with you. Howard Stern said, no. Years, this guy, I want to write a book with you. I want to write a book with you. No, I don't like writing books. I don't enjoy it. Howard Stern turned it down over and over and over again for years. And then finally, this guy presented an earned secret, highly intoxicated with effort. What he did is he went through all of Howard Stern's radio shows, all of Howard Stern's interviews, his podcasts, and he took information from those interviews, from those podcasts, and he wrote a book without Howard Stern. He wrote an entire book. He made a cover, made a title. He printed the book, and he brought it to Howard Stern, and he said, this is the book I wrote for you. All I want is for you to approve of it and sign your name as an author, and you don't have to do anything. And then Howard Stern was so impressed by this earned secret, was so impressed by the effort that went into this, that he agreed to become an author on this book. But then when he agreed, he rewrote the entire book because it wasn't how he wanted it. And they built the book again from the ground up and it became a New York Times bestseller. But he only agreed to do it because this guy went through all the effort of writing a book without him and showed it to him. So that's what an earned secret is. So again, how to get people to back your ideas. Step 1, schedule incubation time. Step 2, cast essential characters. Step 3, find an earned secret. Step 4, make it feel inevitable. I think of all the steps, this is my favorite one, I think. Make it feel inevitable. A typical pitch indicates that an idea is new or innovative. A backable pitch indicates that an idea is inevitable. What does the word inevitable mean? The word inevitable means bound to happen. That regardless of my involvement, regardless of your investment, this idea is bound to happen. So, with or without me, with or without us, this idea is going to happen. So, the founder of Airbnb, when he was pitching the idea of letting strangers come into your home and renting out your own home, a lot of people thought the idea was bad because Why would you open up your house to a stranger who could mess it up? Why would you just let strangers stay in your house? But he said, this idea is going to happen without your investment, and even if I don't create it. And the way he did that was he showed momentum. So he showed in his pitch, he showed that on couchsurfing.com, it was growing and growing and becoming more popular for people to sell their couches. He showed that on Craigslist, people were already renting out their house, probably illegally, but the momentum was already happening on couchsurfing.com and on Craigslist. So make it feel inevitable means that even if you don't like this podcast, even if you don't like the idea of Soul Wealth and you're not going to watch this podcast and you're not going to invest in it, even if I'm not the one pushing the message of Soul Wealth, that someone is going to push the message of Soul Wealth, that it's inevitably going to happen. And you might say, how can you prove that? Soul Wealth is a concept. How can you prove that the idea of a concept is inevitable? And what I would tell you is, okay, what is Soul Wealth? Measuring success by relationships and memories. Why do I believe that concept is inevitable? Well, people right now, we have the highest depression rates we've ever had. We have the highest suicide rates we've ever had. If you go to a college counselors, college therapists are more booked out than they've ever been. More people are on anxiety medication, on depression medication. If I had the time, I would show you the statistics for these things. But we are in a loneliness epidemic. People are more lonely than they've ever been. When someone is lonely, what does that mean? That means they feel a lack in their relationships. They feel isolated. They feel alone. Generally, that happens because they measure success by things that aren't relationships. They measure success by GPA in school, by their career, by the money they're making. So if we have more depression, we have more loneliness, we have more suicide anxiety than ever before, the same way if we had more sickness than ever before, we're going to eventually need more doctors than ever before. If we have more loneliness than ever before, we're going to need more people teaching relationships and memories. So I'm not the first one to invent the idea of investing in relationships. I mean, How to Win Friends and Influence People was written before I was born. I'm just riding the wave of inevitability. Yes, I put my own spin on it. Yes, I invented the word soul wealth as far as I'm aware, and I'm pushing the podcast and presenting the ideas in a new and innovative way. But the truth is, this idea is inevitable. If I'm not pushing it, someone's going to be pushing it. So make it feel inevitable. That means that without me pushing it, without you investing in it, it's going to happen. How do you do this? By showing momentum, what I just explained to you. Another good example is VR. A lot of people are like, I don't want a VR headset. I don't want to be walking around in a world where we all eat Doritos with our VR headsets on. Sure. You know what? I also don't want to be in VR world either. But if you were asking me, should I invest in VR companies? I would say absolutely. Look at Apple AR. I'll show you the momentum. Look at the Apple AR that just released, the Apple VR headset. It's everywhere on YouTube. It's everywhere in person. You don't have to be using it, and I don't have to be buying one to know that it is inevitably the future. So I would highly suggest investing in it. I'm going to invest in that technology. Make it feel inevitable with or without us. It's going to happen. Show momentum. Have vision, not visions. I kind of already covered have vision, not visions. But what that means is that Steve Jobs, when he created the iPhone, he didn't invent the mobile phone. He just had the vision of where it was going. He knew that we have computers, now we have a mobile phone. I'm not inventing the phone, but I'm taking the phone to the inevitable future, which is that computers are going to be in our phone. Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player of all time, has a very popular quote where he says, "I skate to where the puck is going." The best entrepreneurs, the best idea creators skate to where the puck is going. Measuring success by relationships and memories, it's going to happen. Whether or not you watch this podcast, whether or not I'm pushing the message, it is going to happen. So that is step 4. Make it feel inevitable. I love the quote, so I'm going to say it one more time. A typical pitch shows that an idea is new or innovative. A backable pitch shows that an idea is inevitable. So far we've covered four out of the 7 steps, which are schedule incubation time, step 1, cast essential characters, step 2, find and earn secrets, step 3, make it feel inevitable, step 4. Future Ozzy here. I just want to ask you guys for a request. If you're watching on YouTube, could you drop a comment or a like or subscribe? And if you're watching on Apple or Spotify, could you leave a 5-star review? These things really help the show get discovered. And if you help the show get discovered, then I will continue to invest in better guests, in better product, in better equipment, and just make the show overall better. And I really appreciate it because I'm trying to make this podcast my full-time career, and it means the world to me if you share or you'd like or comment or review 5 stars. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Step 5 is flip outsiders to insiders. So, flip outsiders to insiders. This one is so important. Every step is so important, but this one is very, very important. That means that when someone invests in your idea, whether it's you watching the podcast, if you're just someone watching this podcast, you're an outsider. You might be a supporter, but if you don't feel like you're contributing to the future of of this podcast, then you're a spectator watching from the outside. And think of it as this. Fans at a football game are spectators. They're outsiders. Coaches, staff, people on the field, they're insiders. They're a part of the game. They control where the game is going. If you want to get people to invest in your company, people are way more likely to invest if they feel like they have a say in where the future is going. People are way more likely to watch this podcast if they feel like they have a say in where the future is going. Your parents are way more likely to buy you a car if they feel like they have a say in what you're going to do with that car. People want to be insiders, not outsiders. So step 5, flip outsiders to insiders. The first point is share what it could be, not what it has to be. So if you're going into a pitch or into an idea that you're sharing with someone else and you start listing off every detail of exactly how it's going to look like, then you're going to make your idea feel like it's set in stone. And if you make your idea feel like it's set in stone, then people are going to want to support it less because they're going to feel like they have less of a say on the future. So by sharing every detail of an idea and going so in depth on your vision, then you make people feel like outsiders. You make them feel like they can't contribute to your vision. So what you want to do when you go into an idea is you want to, 1, share just enough detail. I could come into a pitch and be like, I'm starting a podcast on soul wealth. It's changing the way people measure success from money, possessions, achievements, and status to relationships and memories. We're going to film on Monday and Thursday. For the first 100 episodes, it's going to look like this. After that, we're going to do this. Then I'm going to do this. And then you guys now feel like outsiders. Everything's so set in stone that you don't have a say. But I want to present my podcast as something that you can invest in, something that you have a say in. I want you to feel that if you comment below and say, hey, Ozzy, you've done a bunch of solo episodes, you've done a bunch of guest episodes, what about a group episode? What about a group episode where you talk about something taboo, like having sex before marriage, which is going to be my next episode, talking about not how to have sex before marriage, about refraining from sex before marriage with a group of people. That's going to be my next episode. But let's say one of you guys suggests that. Making you feel like an insider means that I take your feedback, I actually use it, I give you public credit for it. It's not the story of my podcast, it's the story of our podcast. It's the story of us. And you're the hero. You are the one who came up with the idea for this to be a group podcast. You are the one who had the idea of talking about sex before marriage. This is awesome. So you want to share what it could be, not what it has to be. My vision is that this podcast, it talks about soul wealth and that we film Monday and Thursdays. But if you have a different idea, I don't want my idea to feel set in stone. I want you to be an insider. So share what it could be, not what it has to be. The story of us. It's not my product, it's our product. It's not my podcast, it's our podcast. It's not my car you're buying me, it's our car. It's not my company, it's our company. The story of us. Make them feel like the hero. If someone is investing in your idea, if someone is even giving you feedback, take their feedback, really implement it. When someone gives you feedback, when someone is listening to your idea and they're sharing their thoughts, listen intently, make them feel heard, actually implement their feedback, be open to what they have to say, be open to their suggestions. A backer is way more likely to back your idea if they feel a part of the future of that idea. So share what it could be, not what it has to be, the story of us, make them the hero, and share just enough detail. Share just enough detail that they understand the idea, but not enough detail that the idea feels set in stone. And that's the conclusion of our fifth point, flip outsiders to insiders. So far we've covered 5 out of the 7 points, which are convince yourself first, cast a central character, find an earned secret, make it feel inevitable, flip outsiders to insiders. And the next one, which is probably the most straightforward one, is play exhibition matches. What does play exhibition matches mean? It means practice. If you have an idea and you're going to share it with someone, practice it first. If you're going in for a job interview, don't just show up for your job interview. Practice it with your friends and your family. Even if you're going to ask your parents for help with something, call a friend and run your idea past them before you present it to your parents. If you're going to get investors, don't just do a bunch of research and show up. Practice the investment. Practice the pitch. Step 6, play exhibition matches. Something you need to know is no venue is too small. Let's say I'm going to give a speech in front of 10,000 people. 10,000 people. I might tell myself, I can't practice this because I can't recreate a venue of 10,000 people. Yes, you can. Go do the speech in front of your best friends, and then do it in front of your girlfriend, and then do it in front of your parents. But what you have to make sure when you do the practice speech, when you do the practice pitch, don't give director's commentary. So when you're pitching, don't say, let's say I'm pitching Soul Wealth to 10,000 people, and I'm practicing with my mom. Okay, Mom, at this point, I'm going to walk out onto stage. Today, I'm here to tell you about Soul Wealth. When I'm telling them about Soul Wealth, I'm going to make my point. Don't give director's commentary. What we often do when we're practicing a pitch is we jump in and explain our pitch as we're practicing it. It's not going to be that way. When I'm standing in front of the audience of 10,000 people, I'm not going to jump in and give director's commentary. So practice it exactly how you play. Recreating the venue is impossible. Recreating the experience is very possible. Use low stakes practice to succeed in high stakes moments. So don't give director's commentary when you're practicing to your mom. Say it exactly how you're going to say it in front of 10,000 people. Say it exactly how you're going to say it in your pitch. Be willing to be embarrassed. The reason we feel like we need to give director's commentary is because we don't want to be embarrassed. The whole point is to be embarrassed. The more embarrassed you are in the low stake moments, the better you're going to perform in the real high stake event. So be willing to be embarrassed. Another thing, when you're practicing, when you're pitching your idea, don't ask someone, what did you think? Or could you give me feedback? That is a very hard question because generally the person you're practicing to has no experience in the field that you're talking to, so that they're not going to be able to give you great feedback or give you great advice. Think about times people have said, can you give me feedback? Maybe you've given good feedback, but it's not a good question. It doesn't tell you where to go. So instead of asking someone for feedback or what did you think, what you want to say is, repeat my ideas back to me. Example, this podcast, teaching you how to be backable. If I was showing you this podcast, yes, I might ask you, what did you think? And you might say, it was good. I liked how you talked about being backable. That doesn't really give me good feedback. What I want to know is, do these ideas stay with you? My goal is that you actually learn something, that it actually changes your life, that you take it into the rest of your life. So if you watch this podcast and then I said, repeat step number 6 back to me. Step number 6 was play exhibition matches. What does that mean? Repeat it back to me. If someone was able to listen to this podcast and they could repeat all the points back to me, that would be incredible. That would mean that it was one of the best podcasts I've ever made. I don't think most people would be able to do that just because there's so much information in this podcast. But even if someone could repeat 1 point back to me, that would be great. So don't ask, what do you think? Ask someone to repeat something back to me in their own words. This is beneficial because you know if your idea landed, if they can actually explain your idea, and it also gives you new ways to present your own idea. If someone explains it back to you in a better way than you explained it to them, then you can go and use that in your actual pitch. There's something called the Rule of 21. I'm going to mention it because the book talks about it. What that means is you practice something 21 times before you actually do it. And if you practice something 21 times, then by the time you show up to really explain it, you're going to know it so well that even as curveballs or things go wrong, you're going to be able to continue to explain it. The issue with 21 times is I film 2 podcasts a week. There's no way I could practice this 21 times, but if I were going into a speech in front of 10,000 people, I would for sure practice 21 times. So the rule of 21 has got to be adjusted based on what you're doing and how important it is, but practice way more than you think. For this podcast alone, I created 8 sets of flashcards. I read an entire book. I read the summary of the book 3 times, and I wrote an entire page of exactly, I'm not really reading off of it, but I wrote it. So, I mean, I practiced this many times. This podcast specifically, because I care about it so much, I might have practiced 21 times. And then finally, reboot your style. When you ask someone for feedback or ask someone to repeat your ideas back to you and maybe they don't understand or they're unable to give you feedback, don't just give up on an idea. Don't just say, I'm not good at explaining this. People don't understand. Be courageous enough to reboot your style. When we come up with an idea, we get attached to our way of doing it. And sometimes our way of doing it is confusing, so we just give up on it. We do it, it's my way or the highway. It's I present it my way or I give up. Have the courage to change your style. This doesn't mean you never compromise on your morals, never compromise on your values or your message, but compromise on your product and your delivery. It's okay to reboot your product. It's okay to change your delivery. Recently, I changed the thumbnails and the titles for these podcasts, and that was hard for me. But I know that if I don't experiment, I might be holding myself back from a larger audience. And it's not about having a larger audience, but it's about more people hearing this message and affecting more lives. And it hurts a little bit to change my thumbnails because I'm such a friggin' artist. But if more people are going to hear the message that way, then I'm going to take the courage to reboot my style. So step 6, play exhibition matches. 6 out of 7 steps complete. We have 1 left. Anyways, to recap, step 1, convince yourself first. Step 2, cast a central character. Step 3, find and earn secret. Step 4, make it feel inevitable. Step 5, flip outsiders to insiders. Step 6, play exhibition matches. And our final step of becoming a backable person, our final step of getting people to back your ideas is step 7, let go of your ego. This one is so important. We all have an ego. I don't know if it's possible to 100% eliminate your ego, but in pretty much everything you do, the less ego you have, the better you will perform. And so, what letting go of your ego looks like in pitching an idea or being backable is that, 1, you forget yourself. So, I'm going to continue with the idea of giving a speech in front of 10,000 people. If you're going to give a speech in front of 10,000 people and you think of that speech as a reflection of yourself, you're going to put so much weight on yourself. If you go into that speech thinking, I want people to like me, I want people to think I'm a good speaker, I want people to think that I presented soul wealth in such a unique, cool way, then you're putting unbearable weight on yourself. I don't want to say unbearable. Some people can do that and they'll make it through it. But I just had a friend who fought in his first professional fight, and he asked professional fighters, what is the best piece of advice you can give? And what they told him is, the more calm you can be, the better you will perform. The more calm person generally wins the fight. I'm sure this applies to speeches. The more calm person generally gives the best speech. Not calm as in my voice is like this. Calm as in inner peace. The more calm person generally wins the game, wins the fight, wins the speech. And the more you put all that pressure on yourself, I want people to like me, I want people to think I'm a great speaker, the more weight you're going to put on yourself, the harder it is to be calm, the harder it is to preach your message. So what you want to do is forget yourself. When you go on stage to talk about soul wealth to 10,000 people, it's not about people liking me. It's about the idea. I want people to resonate with soul wealth. I want soul wealth to impact the audience. Think about the people you're serving, the audience. Think about the message you're preaching, soul wealth, but don't make it about you. It's easier to speak about someone else than it is to speak about yourself. Think about this. How many of you guys have no issue giving other people compliments? How many of you guys have issues giving yourself compliments? It's easier to speak about someone else than it is to speak about yourself. So when you go on stage, when you go to present your idea, forget yourself. Think about the audience that you're serving. Think about the idea that you're presenting, but forget yourself. And even more importantly, for me, this is the biggest hack. Some of you might like it, some of you might not. The biggest hack, I make it about God everywhere I go. If I'm going on stage, make it about God. God's in control. I'm preaching this message for God. Being able to cast my anxieties, cast my worries on God is the ultimate hack. So you don't make it about yourself. You make it about your product. You make it about the person you're serving. For me, that's generally God. And then 2, you show, don't tell. So let's say you're pitching a new app. You can talk all day about the app. Oh, the app's so great because it's going to do this and this and this. But you know what's even better than talking about the app? Giving them the app and letting them try it. Giving them the product and letting them try it. With something that's not tangible, like the message of soul wealth, it's hard to give that to someone and let them try it. But when you're presenting an idea, show, don't tell. If there's a product, if there's something for you to show, you don't need to keep talking about it. Just show them. And then 3rd, when letting go of your ego is you want to find the passionate few. Our ego tells us that we should get as many people to like us as possible. Even a podcast. Get as many podcast listeners as possible. But the idea of 1,000 True Fans says that you can have 1 million people who glance at your podcast and click off in 30 seconds. Or you can have 1,000 people that watch the podcast all the way through. 1 million people who watch a podcast for 10 seconds, none of those people are going to come back for future episodes. None of those people are going to buy products that I release. But if I have 1,000 people who watch all the way through and they're super fans, those super fans are going to buy my merch. They're going to continue to watch my podcast. They're going to share it with their friends. So when you're pitching an idea, your ego says reach as many people as possible. But when you let go of your ego, you want to focus on the passionate few. If you have one person that likes your podcast, speak to that one person. If you have 10 people that like your podcast, speak to those 10 people. When you focus on the passionate few, they will sell everyone else on your idea. Right now, this podcast, in the first week or so, if it's anything like my other podcast right now, it's probably going to get between 100 and 300 views. I love you, 100 and 300 people. I want to speak to you. I want this message to resonate so deeply with you that you go and share it with your friends. I'm not focused on hacking the algorithm and getting 1 million subscribers. I'm going to do my best to create the best title and thumbnail to make the best product, but I'm way more focused on the passionate few. That wraps up the 7 points. Almost done with the podcast, but something I forgot to mention that is such a huge point, and I wish I said it in the beginning, is when people think about what makes an idea good or what makes someone a good speaker, they usually chalk it up to 2 things, which are confidence and charisma. They think that guy is so so good on stage because he has this crazy gusto, that he has this crazy confidence, and that he's so charismatic. That actor is so good because he's so charismatic and confident. That speaker is so good because he's so charismatic and confident. That podcaster is so good because he's charismatic and confident. Those things are important, but they're not the most important. In the book, Backable, Sunil Gupta takes the reader through the greatest speeches of all time. He takes you through Steve Jobs announcing the iPhone, and he says, put down your book and go watch Steve Jobs announce the iPhone. Steve Jobs probably says 80 times in that speech. Go to TEDx, filter it by the most popular TED Talk of all time. The guy was not a confident, charismatic speaker. So why? Elon Musk delivered some of the greatest speeches ever. Not a good speaker, not confident, not charismatic. So why are some of the greatest speeches of all time delivered by people who aren't confident and charismatic, yet we still consider them the greatest speeches of all time? And it comes down to one thing: conviction. When Steve Jobs was presenting the iPhone, he believed that his idea was going to change the world, and his belief in his own idea is what made the audience, what made the viewers want to invest in the iPhone, want to use the product. It was his conviction. Conviction is a hard thing to point out because with confidence, you can point out little things. I know that person's not confident because they're huddled up like this. I know this person's confident because he's open wide. I know this person's charismatic because look at their smile and their bubbly alert. Conviction's not like that. You can't really teach it. Conviction is how much you believe in your own idea. And however much you believe in your own idea will come off and be presented to other people. So conviction is the most important part. And that I should have mentioned this in step number 1, which was convince yourself first. Because when you convince yourself first, when you become convicted on your idea, then whenever you share an idea after that, your conviction will bleed through and it will become the investors, the backers' conviction. So you need to be convicted first in your own idea. Shout out to God. Pray over this podcast. God has given me everything, any talent I have. Something I'm trying to do now is let go of my ego when I come on this podcast. I'm trying to make it about the idea of soul wealth. I'm trying to think about the audience, and I'm trying to serve God. And there was a Bible verse that stood out to me. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Proverbs 16:9. So that even when I go into an idea, when I go into a pitch, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to try to make myself backable, but I always dedicate it to God. If it is your will, let this succeed. If it is your will, let this podcast do well. If it is your will, but God, if it's not your will, I don't even want it. And that has made me even more backable because that, even just giving it all to God has made me more backable because I'm just so convicted that God's going to make everything work out the way He wants it to. So I don't really have that much weight in performing on my podcast. My camera just died. I was pretty much wrapping up the podcast anyways, but a couple last things I wanted to say are, if you liked this episode, please go buy the book Backable by Sunil Gupta. I don't even have an affiliate link. I might try to create one, but I'm not getting paid anything. It's just that this whole podcast is from that book, and I need to credit him if you like it. I also just want to pray. God, I pray that this message, this podcast would reach the people that you want it to reach. God, I pray that if people want to become more backable, that they would be able to memorize and that these words would sit on their heart. But God, I pray more importantly that these people would come to know you and know your son, Jesus, as a result of this podcast. God, I thank you for giving me the skills and the ability to speak about it. God, I thank you that I don't have an unbearable weight. I don't have this crazy weight of performance because you are with me and your will is going to take place because I give it to you, God. And it's so beautiful how you give us free will to control our futures, yet you will also help those who surrender themselves to you, God. And I just want to give this podcast full surrenderance to you, God. Take it wherever you want it to go.
even if that means it doesn't exist. God, I just want your will to take place. And I pray for the people on the other end of this podcast listening to this. I pray that you'd work in their lives, that you'd bless them, that you'd help them to come to know your son, Jesus. And God, thank you for everything. Amen. Thank you guys for watching.